Hi, I'm Dr. Fox, licensed psychologist in the state of Texas, and there's been a resurgence of interest due to the Netflix series related to Jeffrey Dahmer, and I thought you might find it interesting to go over some of the actual information. Now, in this video, I'm going to discuss details from the forensic investigator's notes and research to apply an aspect of reality to the myth of Jeffrey Dahmer. We'll explore the details from the scene and victim autopsy results with a focus on the hostility. Now, the Netflix series seems pretty accurate based upon investigators' notes, so there may be some unintentional spoilers for the Netflix show, just so you're aware. So please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was a serial killer who at age 31 made local and national news. He was often described as a loner as a child who grew up in a dysfunctional family, due to recurrent arguments between his mother and father, leading to antagonistic and aggressive feelings towards his parents. Now, his mother was described as a neurotic, depressed woman, and his father was described as absent, absorbed into his own career, and due to this, did not allow Jeffrey to reach a stable level of adult maturity. Now, Jeffrey often self-medicated his anger and hostility with alcohol, starting in his adolescence. He harbored great ambivalence about his sexual orientation, feeling frequently frustrated by it, and eventually directed his hostility into sadistic behavior against people who accepted his sexual advances. It's like, I hate this aspect of myself, so how can you like it? So instead of harming myself, I'll harm you. This becomes that underlying conceptualization that in many ways becomes a rationalization for his aggressive behavior and his sadistic behaviors. His first murder occurred at age 18 while he was alone in his parents' home. After strangling his first victim, a man who he casually met but was not gay, and this drove him into a fit of rage, resulting in him destroying the body by cutting it into pieces and burying it in his backyard. Dahmer was momentarily in college and then in the United States Army for 2 years. He eventually returned to Milwaukee, where between 1988 and 1990, he perfected his practice of grooming and enticing 15 young victims, most were in their 20s, into his home. He would entice them by promises of money for posing for photographs and implicit exchange of physical contact. In July of 1991, law enforcement officers conducted an investigation of the premises after responding to a naked African-American man running down the street of the city, right? So he's running down city streets while handcuffed. Upon return with the police officers to Dahmer's residence, they entered into the apartment and took Jeffrey Dahmer into custody. Dahmer openly discussed his role in the killings with investigators, even though this was against the advice of his legal counsel. So Dahmer was a valuable resource for corroboration and verification of information for the pathologists and law enforcement officials during the investigation of the case into him. Medical examiners discovered numerous body parts, including 7 human skulls, 3 of which were painted, 4 human heads, and 1 dissected postcranial skeleton from a portable freezer, and 3 skeletonized bodies from a 55-gallon plastic storage drum. Now, many Polaroid photographs of the victims in various stages of dissection and dismemberment were throughout the house, but most were concentrated and found within a drawer in the bedroom. These victims had been photographed both alive and in various positions after they had been killed. The refrigerator contained a cardboard box with the head of a victim in a state of early decomposition. The only food item was a can of Crisco grease. Now, the freezer contained a human heart sectioned into 3 pieces and a large muscle mass contained in a Ziploc plastic bag. The Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's toxicology findings identified the presence of a sedative, triazolam, in 2 victims, as well as cocaine in 1 victim. Dahmer openly told law enforcement that he would typically grind up the medication and place it in the glass prior to leaving his apartment in search of potential victims. The survivor of his last attack stated that Dahmer had been charming and calm in his behavior, like the boy next door. This was the wolf in sheep's clothing, as it presented the antithesis of a person who would later dismember bodies, boil the body parts to destroy the flesh and keep the bones and skulls as fetishes, and photograph symbolic body parts and whole naked bodies in sexually suggestive positions because, and Dahmer later said this, he wanted to keep them as mementos to keep him company. So now that we kind of have an idea of the framework of certainly the murders and the crimes, let's look at the psychological makeup of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer was ambivalent and confused about his sexuality and was overwhelmed by feelings of anticipated rejection by others that brought about his sadistic sexual behavior, compulsion, and destruction of the object of his pseudosexual attention, and the detestable source of his attraction and of his need for power and control. Now, I want to define pseudosexual here, which is someone who performs sexual acts or openly indicate sexual behavior contrary to their own sexual orientation. So this can become a foundational component of confusion, but if you don't explore that confusion and you let it fester into something else, it can fester into extreme hostility and aggression that is very destructive, sometimes to the self, sometimes to others, and sometimes to both. Common personality facets and traits of serial killers include sexual immaturity, passivity, loneliness, perverse sexuality, frustration, fear of non-acceptance by a hostile world, and a mixture of emotional detachment and aggressive hostility that is core to the psychopathology of the personality of a serial killer. Dahmer's destructive and fetish-driven behavior were expressions of his deep ambivalence about his own sexual orientation and his deep-seated aggressive hostility and love toward the objects of his desires. It's this intense conflict of two things that he feels cannot exist inside himself. Now, he treated his victims as objects that he disposed of like a child does with his toys, taking them apart to see what makes them the way they are, taking them apart to show who was in power and who was in control, and possibly showing unconsciously that he was not always the passive, dependent individual that he feared himself to be. Now, Dahmer was ultimately diagnosed as having a mixed personality disorder with sadistic, obsessive, fetishistic, antisocial, necrophilic features, typical of what has been called the organized, non-social lust murderer. Don't believe what you read on the internet that says that he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and a psychotic disorder. That is simply not true. So I hope that you found this interesting. I would love to hear your comments, and please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And please take care and check out my other videos. That would be great. Be well and be safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.